He promised me grandchildren for a $1.2 million house. He lied. My son's greed put my husband in the hospital. My revenge put them on the street. My dreams, these last few years, had all been in pastel colors. Soft yellows, baby blues, and the gentle pink of a newborn's cheek. I am Joanna. I am 60 years old, and my most profound, all-consuming desire was to be a grandmother. It was a longing so deep it felt like a physical ache in my chest. I could practically smell the cinnamon and apple from the pies I would bake, their sweet aroma filling a kitchen alive with the sound of tiny pattering feet. I pictured myself on a park bench, the warm Virginia sun on my face, pushing a swing higher and higher to a chorus of delighted giggles. These were not idle daydreams. They were the future I had promised myself, the reward at the end of a long life of hard work and quiet sacrifice. My husband, Michael, shared this dream with a quiet, desperate intensity. He had given 40 years of his life to the sea, working as a mechanical engineer on a massive cargo ship. It was a brutal life that had stolen his youth and left him with a constellation of health problems, a bad back, a persistent cough from the diesel fumes, and a heart that had been working overtime for far too long. He was a good, steady man, and his only regret was the time he had lost with our son Christopher due to his long months away. Now, in retirement, he saw a chance to reclaim that lost time to pour all the love and attention he had stored up for decades into a new generation. He wanted to teach a grandson how to fish, to build a granddaughter a magnificent dollhouse. He wanted to see his family name, his bloodline, continue. Christopher, our only child, was the sole gatekeeper to this dream, and he knew it. He and his wife, Ashley, had been married for 3 years, and the subject of children was a constant, painful dance. They were in their early 30s, a perfect age to start a family, but their excuse was always the same. "We can't bring a child into the world without a proper home, Mom," Christopher would say, his voice full of a practiced, earnest sincerity. "Ashley deserves a real family nest, a place where our kids can grow up safe and happy with a big backyard. We just can't afford it." Ashley would nod in agreement, her pretty face a mask of sorrowful longing. "Oh, Joanna, it's my greatest wish," she would sigh. "But we have to be responsible. We couldn't bear to raise a baby in our cramped little apartment." Their words were like a key turning a lock in my heart. The logic was so simple, so seductive. The only thing standing between me and my dream of grandchildren was a house. The pity I felt for Christopher, for the life of supposed struggle he was living, mingled with my own selfish, desperate yearning. Michael and I had many long, quiet talks on our small porch in the evenings. We had our own home, paid off and comfortable, and a substantial retirement fund. It was the fruit of Michael's 40 years at sea and my own careful, frugal management of our household. It was supposed to be our security for the rest of our days. "We could help them, Joe," Michael had said one night, his voice raspy. "We're not getting any younger. If we want to see those grandkids while we still have the energy to chase them around—" He didn't need to finish the sentence, so we made the decision. We sat down with Christopher and Ashley and laid out our offer. They had found their dream home, a ridiculously grand new construction with 6 bedrooms and a swimming pool, priced at a breathtaking $1.5 million. We would take our entire life savings, every penny we had, and make the $300,000 down payment. The remaining $1.2 million would have to be a mortgage. Christopher, working unofficially for cash at a construction company, couldn't get a loan that large, but I, with my perfect credit score and the collateral of our own paid-off home, could. We agreed that the loan would be in my name. The deal was that Christopher would give us the monthly mortgage payment in cash, and we would make the official transfer to the bank. It was risky, but they swore on everything holy they would not let us down. They hugged us, they cried, they painted a beautiful picture of our near future filled with holidays and the sound of a baby's laughter echoing through the halls of their new home. We were drunk on hope, and we signed the papers. The weight of that $200,000 debt settled on my shoulders. But I told myself it was the price of happiness, the cost of fulfilling our life's purpose. The first 3 months were pure, unadulterated bliss. It was a golden autumn, and the future seemed as bright and promising as the crimson leaves on the maple trees. Christopher and Ashley moved into their palace, and we were frequent, honored guests. I would arrive with armfuls of groceries, my heart soaring as I cooked in their magnificent, state-of-the-art kitchen. Michael would spend hours in the vast backyard sketching out plans for a truly epic treehouse, his eyes sparkling with a youthful excitement I hadn't seen in years. We'd sit on their expansive back deck, sipping iced tea, and they would talk about the future, about the nursery they were planning in the east-facing bedroom, about the names they were considering. They were masters of their craft, weaving a beautiful tapestry of hope that was so vivid, so detailed, that we couldn't help but believe in it. On the first of each month, Christopher would arrive at our door, a thick envelope of cash in his hand, a grateful smile on his face. "Here you go, Mom. We're so grateful you have no idea." He would hug me, and the solid feel of the envelope, the crispness of the bills was a tangible reassurance. It was proof that our sacrifice was being honored, that our trust was well placed. Michael's anxiety would visibly melt away each time that payment was made, and we would transfer the massive sum to the bank, feeling like partners in our son's bright future. We were not just parents. We were investors in a dream, and for a short, beautiful time, it seemed like the soundest investment we had ever made. The first crack in the foundation appeared in the 4th month. The first of the month came and went with no word from Christopher. I waited a day, then another, my anxiety a low hum in the back of my mind. Finally, on the 3rd, I called him. His voice was a performance of pure stress and apology. "Mom, I am so sorry," he said, his words rushed. "My boss, he's having a cash flow problem. A big client is late on a payment, and it's affecting all our payroll. He swore to me we'll be paid in full by the middle of the month with a bonus for the trouble. Can you cover it this once? I promise I'll make it up to you." Of course. I said yes. What mother wouldn't? He was my son. These things happened. Michael and I made the transfer from our savings account, the first unplanned withdrawal. We told ourselves it was a minor bump in the road, a single storm cloud in an otherwise clear blue sky. But the next month, the storm cloud returned, larger and darker. This time, the excuse was illness. "Ashley has a terrible flu, Mom," he'd said, his voice laced with manufactured worry. "I've had to take a week off work to care for her, and the doctor's bills, they just wiped us out. We're so short this month. I feel terrible asking again, but..." We paid again. The withdrawal from our savings felt more painful this time. The number in our account, once a source of comfort and security, was now visibly, alarmingly, shrinking. The excuses became a monthly ritual of creative fiction. One month, it was the transmission on his truck, a vital tool for his work. which had supposedly exploded and required a catastrophically expensive repair. The next, it was a surprise tax issue they had to settle immediately. Each phone call from my son, once a source of simple joy, now filled me with a cold, sickening dread. He was a masterful actor, his voice always filled with the perfect blend of panic, shame, and a desperate plea for understanding. He would turn my questions back on me, making me feel guilty for my concern. Mom, you don't think I want to be paying you? This is tearing me apart. The pressure is it's immense. The pressure was immense, but it was not on him. It was on us. It was on Michael. My husband, a man of logic and integrity, a man who believed a promise was as binding as a signed contract, was crumbling under the weight of our son's deceit. He would spend his evenings at the kitchen table, our bank statements spread out before him, a calculator in his hand, his face a grim mask of worry. The numbers didn't lie. Our life savings, the fortress we had built to protect us in our old age, was being dismantled, brick by brick, to pay for a mansion we didn't live in, and a dream that was beginning to feel like a cruel mirage. Michael stopped sleeping. He lost weight. I would see him standing at the window, rubbing his chest, his breathing shallow. The final catastrophic blow came 6 months after the payments had first stopped. The county property tax bill for their mansion arrived at our house, as all the official mail did. It was another astronomical sum we hadn't fully accounted for. I left it on the kitchen table. That evening I saw Michael staring at it, his face ashen. He picked up our latest bank statement, his eyes tracing the long list of withdrawals, the devastatingly small number at the bottom. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a terror I had never seen before. "Joe," he whispered, his voice cracking, "it's almost gone. What are we going to do?" And then he gasped. He clutched his chest, his face contorting in agony. The papers fluttered from his hand as he collapsed from his chair onto the floor. The next hour was a blur of pure, unadulterated terror. My own panicked screams, the wail of the ambulance, the frantic race to the hospital. I found myself alone in a cold, sterile waiting room in the cardiac wing. A grim-faced doctor finally emerged from a set of double doors. "Your husband has suffered a major coronary event, Mrs. Taylor," he said, his voice professional but devoid of comfort. "The stress appears to have been a significant contributing factor. We have him stabilized for now, but he is in critical condition. We are moving him to the ICU." I sat on a hard plastic chair under the buzzing fluorescent lights, the doctor's words, a death knell in the terrifying silence. The grand house I had bought in exchange for a promise of future joy had just presented me with its true bill. It wasn't just our savings, it was demanding. It was my husband's life. And in that moment, I understood that the poison of my son's selfishness was far more deadly than I had ever allowed myself to imagine. The intensive care unit is a place where time ceases to exist. There is no day or night, only the relentless, artificial twilight of a windowless room, punctuated by the constant, rhythmic beeping of machines that are breathing and beating for the man you love. My world shrank to the four walls of that room. I spent hours, which bled into days, in a worn-out visitor's chair, my hand wrapped around Michael's, which felt unnervingly cool and still in my own. He looked so fragile, a pale shadow of the strong, capable man he was, lost in a tangle of tubes and wires, his face peaceful in a medically induced sleep. The steady rise and fall of his chest, orchestrated by a ventilator, was the only comfort in a world that had become a living nightmare. Fear was a constant companion, a cold, heavy presence that sat on my chest. But a new, more practical terror began to creep in. On the second day, a hospital administrator, a woman with a kind but weary face, came to speak with me. She talked of insurance deductibles, of co-pays for specialists, of the staggering daily cost of an ICU bed. As she spoke, I could feel a new wave of panic rising, a desperate, sickening feeling of being trapped. I was watching my husband fight for his life, and in the back of my mind, a frantic internal calculator was tallying a bill that I knew we could no longer afford. The mansion, the source of all this pain, continued to demand its tribute, its pound of flesh, even here. I knew I had to call Christopher. A small, foolish part of me, a part I couldn't seem to kill, still clung to the hope that this would be the thing to finally break through his shell of selfishness. The news that his father was lying in a hospital bed, hovering between life and death because of the stress he had caused, had to mean something. It had to. I walked out into the sterile quiet of the hospital corridor to make the call, my hand trembling as I dialed. He answered on the second ring, his voice casual. "Hey, Mom, any news?" "He's the same," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The doctors say it's touch and go. And Christopher, they said it was the stress, the financial stress." I let that hang in the air, a clear, direct accusation. His response was a masterpiece of deflection. "Oh, God, Mom, that's awful. I feel terrible. It's the worst timing imaginable. Ashley and I are so on edge already with everything. Now this? I just don't know how I'm supposed to handle any more bad news." The sheer, breathtaking narcissism of his words, of framing his father's potential death as an inconvenience to him, left me speechless. I pressed on, my voice hardening. "Christopher, I need you to listen to me. There is no more money. The savings are almost gone. I'm here at the hospital and they're already talking about bills that are more than our yearly income. I cannot pay the next mortgage payment. Do you understand me? It is not possible." This was his moment. This was his chance to say, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle it." Or, "I'm on my way." Or even just, "I'm so sorry." He did none of those things. Instead, a wall of cold, defensive anger came up. "Mom, really? Now? I can't deal with money stuff right now. My dad is in the hospital. Can we please just focus on what's important? I'll try to figure something out later. I've got to go." He hung up, leaving me standing alone in the hallway, the silence on the other end of the line more damning than any hateful words. He offered no help. He accepted no responsibility. He felt nothing. I returned to Michael's bedside, a cold, hard stone of despair settling in my gut. I sat there for an hour, watching the rhythmic dance of numbers on the monitor, feeling the last of my hope drain away. Then, my phone buzzed in my purse. It was a text message, not from my son checking in on his father. It was from Ashley. The first message read, "Chris told me you called. Hope Michael feels better. BTW. The mortgage is due in 3 days. Just a reminder so we don't get a late fee." I stared at the screen, my mind unable to process the cold transactional cruelty of it. A reminder. As if I were her personal assistant who had forgotten a minor task. My fingers, clumsy with rage and grief, typed back a simple, desperate reply. "Ashley, I am in the ICU with his father. We have no money left. I cannot make the payment." Her response was almost instantaneous. "What do you mean you can't make it? You signed the loan. It's your responsibility. We are trying to build a life here and now our credit is going to be ruined. BC, you can't manage your finances. Unbelievable." My breath hitched. My vision blurred. Before I could even think of what to say, another message appeared. Honestly, Joanna, this is the most selfish thing I've ever seen. You make a promise to help us and then back out the second things get a little tough for you. Some mother you are. You should be ashamed of yourself. I felt like I was going to be sick. I was reading these words, these vicious, hateful accusations, while sitting next to my husband who was lying near death because of them. And then the final message, the one that broke everything inside me, arrived. You are a shameless, unreliable woman. You're going to give Chris a heart attack with all this stress you're putting him under. I lowered the phone. The screen glowed in the dim light of the room, illuminating a monument to their bottomless greed and breathtaking cruelty. They had taken our savings. They had broken my husband's health. And now they were trying to steal the last thing I had left, my dignity. The sorrow and fear that had paralyzed me for days did not disappear, but they were suddenly consumed by a new, clarifying emotion, a pure, cold, and righteous rage. They thought I was a weak, old woman they could bleed dry and then discard. They were about to learn how wrong they were. My husband was a fighter, spending every ounce of his energy to stay alive. As I stood there, watching his chest rise and fall, I made a vow to him, to myself. I would become a fighter too. The dream of grandchildren was dead, a casualty of a war I hadn't even known I was fighting. A new dream, a dream of justice, was just being born. I stood by Michael's bedside, the hateful words from Ashley's texts burning a hole in my consciousness. The beeping of the heart monitor, a sound that had been a source of terror, suddenly became a rhythm of resolve. Each steady pulse was a reminder that my husband was a fighter, that he was holding on with every ounce of his strength. The thought that I had been weeping and pleading while he lay here fighting filled me with a sudden, profound shame. The time for tears was over. The time for being a victim was over. My first act of this new life was a small digital amputation. I opened the text thread from Ashley, a long scroll of her cruelty and my desperation. I read her final monstrous accusation one last time, searing it into my memory as a permanent reminder. Then I deleted the entire conversation. I deleted her contact from my phone and I deleted Christopher's. It was a declaration of war, a silent, symbolic act of severing the ties that had been strangling us. I settled back into the chair, my mind whirring. The fog of grief and panic was beginning to clear, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I had been looking at this situation as a mother, through a lens of unconditional love and profound hurt. That had been my mistake. Love had no place here. This was not a family dispute. It was a business transaction that had gone toxic. They were not my beloved children. They were defaulting tenants. As I was processing this cold new reality, I felt a faint pressure against my palm. I looked down. Michael's fingers, which had been limp and still for 2 days, had twitched against mine. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but to me, it was a sign from the heavens. It was a flicker of the strong, resilient man I loved, telling me he was still in there, that he was fighting to come back to me. A surge of strength, fierce and protective, coursed through me. He was doing his part. Now, I had to do mine. I needed a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a warrior. My mind raced through our quiet circle of friends and acquaintances, and I found nothing. But then I remembered Michael's old friend, George, a tough old salt, who had been a captain on another freighter. Years ago, George had been locked in a nasty legal battle with a supplier who had tried to cheat him out of a small fortune. I remembered him talking about his lawyer, a man he had described as a purebred bulldog who doesn't let go until he tastes blood. I found George's number and stepped out into the hallway. He answered, his voice a gravelly boom. I kept my explanation brief and clinical, stripped of the messy emotional details. "George, it's Joanna Taylor," I said. "I'm in a serious financial dispute. It's complicated and it's ugly. You once told me about a lawyer you used. A bulldog. I need his name." George, a man who respected privacy and understood the sound of real trouble, didn't ask questions. "Arthur Corrigan," he said instantly. "Downtown, he's expensive as hell, but he's the best. I'll text you his number. You give him hell, Joe." I found a small, quiet hospital chapel and interfaith room with rows of empty chairs. I sat in the back, the silence a welcome reprieve, and dialed the number. I expected to get a secretary, to be told to make an appointment weeks from now, but when I explained the nature of the emergency, financial exploitation leading to a medical crisis, I was put through. "Arthur Corrigan speaking," a sharp, impatient voice said. I took a deep breath and laid out the facts of my case, my voice as steady and emotionless as if I were reporting on a piece of faulty machinery. "Mr. Corrigan, my name is Joanna Taylor. My husband and I used our life savings to provide a $300,000 down payment on a home for our son. To secure the $1.2 million mortgage, I signed as the sole loanee. The deed, the mortgage, every legal document is in my name and my name only. The verbal agreement was that our son would provide the monthly payment in cash. He has now defaulted for 6 consecutive months. We have been covering this debt from our retirement savings, which are now nearly depleted. The financial stress of this situation has caused my husband to suffer a major heart attack, and he is currently in the ICU. My son and his wife continue to reside in the house and refuse to pay or leave." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The lawyer's impatient energy was gone, replaced by a focused, predatory stillness. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. "Mrs. Taylor," he said finally, his voice now laced with a deep professional interest. "Let me be perfectly clear so you understand your position. Based on what you have told me, you are not their victim. You are their creditor and their landlady. The house they are living in is not their home. It is your $1.2 million asset, an asset which is tied to a $1.2 million liability that is currently bankrupting you and threatening your husband's life." His words were like a splash of cold water. He had reframed my entire reality. I was not a failed, heartbroken mother. I was a property owner with a tenant problem. The emotional entanglement was a smokescreen. The legal reality was a fortress. "I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., he commanded. "Bring every piece of paper you have, the deed, the loan agreement, your bank statements, showing the payments you have made, every text message and email. We are going to start eviction and foreclosure proceedings immediately." I walked out of the quiet chapel and back towards the relentless beeping of the ICU. I was not the same woman who had entered. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach for my husband, but it was no longer in control. My son and his wife had made a fatal miscalculation. They had assumed my love for them was a weakness they could exploit forever. They had forgotten that this weak, old woman was the one who held the deed, the one whose name was on the loan, the one who held all the cards. The game of being a loving, sacrificial mother was over. A new game. A game of contracts and consequences was about to begin, and I was going to win. The morning after my vow in the hospital chapel, I left Michael's side for the first time in 3 days. A kind friend from our church, a woman named Carol, who knew the deep bond Michael and I shared, had agreed to sit with him for a few hours. I left the hushed, beeping quiet of the ICU and stepped out into a world that felt jarringly normal. The sun was shining. People were heading to work, laughing, living their lives, completely oblivious to the war that was raging inside of me. I drove not home, but downtown, clutching a heavy tote bag filled with the paper trail of my own destruction. The bag contained every document I could find, the original mortgage agreement with my signature, stark and clear, the deed to the house, also solely in my name, 6 months of bank statements showing the massive, crippling withdrawals, printouts of Ashley's venomous text messages, and the hospital admission forms detailing Michael's critical condition. This heavy bag was my burden, but it was also my ammunition. Arthur Corrigan's law office was on the top floor of a glass skyscraper that reflected the vast Virginia sky. The reception area was a symphony of quiet, intimidating power, dark mahogany, plush leather chairs, and abstract art that was probably worth more than my own house. It was a world away from my cozy, comfortable life, a place designed to make ordinary people feel small. But as I sat there waiting, I did not feel small. I felt like a soldier in a war room waiting for my general. Arthur Corrigan was exactly the man George had described. He was in his late 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He gestured for me to sit and pointed to the massive, polished desk between us. "Let's see what you have, Mrs. Taylor." For the next hour, I laid out the contents of my bag, creating a timeline of my son's betrayal. Mr. Corrigan reviewed each document with a focused, clinical detachment. He read the mortgage papers, his finger tracing my signature. He scanned the bank statements, his expression unreadable as he saw the hemorrhaging of our life savings. He even read Ashley's text messages, his face betraying no emotion at their casual cruelty. This was exactly what I needed. I didn't need sympathy. I had received plenty of that. I needed a weapon. When he was finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers, his sharp eyes fixed on me. "Mrs. Taylor, this is extraordinarily clean from a legal perspective," he said, his voice crisp and devoid of emotion. "Your emotional ties to your son are, forgive my bluntness, irrelevant to the facts. The facts are these. You are the sole legal owner of the property at 125 Willow Creek Lane. You are the sole signatory and responsible party for the $1.2 million loan secured against that property. Your son and his wife are, in the eyes of the law, tenants at will. They have no lease, no equity, and no legal claim to the property whatsoever." Hearing the situation laid out in such stark, legal terms was profoundly liberating. The shame, the guilt, the feeling of being a failed mother, it all began to evaporate under the harsh, clarifying light of the law. "Their verbal agreement to pay you," he continued, "has been broken for 6 consecutive months. This breach, which has now resulted in quantifiable financial and medical damages to you and your husband, gives us every conceivable right to remove them from your property and recover your asset." He leaned forward. "So, this is what we are going to do." He laid out the strategy, a cold, methodical campaign. Step 1. Today, we will draft and send a formal demand letter via certified mail in a process server. It will state the facts, that they are in arrears for 6 months of mortgage payments totaling a specific sum. It will demand immediate repayment of that sum by a specific date. We'll give them 10 business days. It will also state that if they wish to remain in the property, They must sign a formal, legally binding lease agreement and provide a security deposit. This is the first necessary step. They will, I assure you, ignore it or react with hostility. Their reaction will strengthen our position. He paused, letting that sink in. Step 2. The moment that 10-day period expires, we will serve them with a formal legal notice to quit, giving them 30 days to vacate the premises. This is the official start of the eviction process. Step 3. If they are still in the property after 30 days, I will file an unlawful detainer lawsuit in civil court. A judge will grant the eviction. The sheriff will then be authorized to remove them. Step 4. He concluded, his voice flat. Once the property is vacant, we will put it on the market, sell it, pay off your outstanding loan, and recover what is left of your savings and my legal fees. You will be made as whole as the law can make you. It was a brutal, efficient, and beautiful plan. A single question remained. What about the down payment? I asked, my voice quiet. Our life savings. Mr. Corrigan's expression softened for the first time, a flicker of something almost like sympathy in his eyes. That, Mrs. Taylor, was legally a gift. We are unlikely to ever recover it. Our mission now is not to undo the past, but to stop the bleeding and secure your future. I nodded, a single sharp movement. The loss of that money, the fruit of Michael's life of hard labor, was a bitter pill. But I swallowed it. It was the price of a lesson I had taken 60 years to learn. Do it, I said, my voice firm with a resolve I didn't know I possessed. Start the process today. I watched as he turned to his computer and began to type. The cold legalistic language of the demand letter filled the screen, a brutal and perfect translation of my pain into the language of consequence. It was a formal declaration of war, an announcement that the Bank of Mom and Dad, the institution they had so gleefully bankrupted, was under new management. I walked out of Arthur Corrigan's office into the bright Virginia sunlight. The heavy bag of documents I had carried in felt significantly lighter on the way out. I hadn't come for comfort. I had come for a weapon, and Mr. Corrigan had just handed me a legal cannon. They thought they were safe in the beautiful house I had bought, protected by my love and their own lies. They had no idea that the law was now on my side, and the law, unlike a mother's heart, does not forgive. The days following my meeting with Arthur Corrigan were a strange mixture of profound anxiety and newfound strength. My life became a starkly divided routine. By day, I was the devoted wife, sitting by Michael's bedside in the hushed, beeping world of the ICU, reading to him, talking to him, praying for any sign of recovery. His condition had stabilized, but he remained in a fragile, critical state. By night, I would return to our empty house and transform into a client, a plaintiff. I would spend hours on the phone with Mr. Corrigan's office, reviewing documents, answering questions, and building our case. The two worlds felt a universe apart, yet they were inextricably linked. The fight I was waging in the legal world was for the man sleeping silently in the hospital world. The process server confirmed delivery of the demand letter on a Tuesday afternoon. Ashley had been the one to sign for it. I pictured the scene with grim satisfaction. Her arrogant dismissal of the uniformed server, the ripping open of the official-looking envelope, her perfectly made-up face crumbling into a mask of shock and fury as she read the cold, unforgiving legal prose. The 10-day countdown had begun. For 3 days there was silence. It was a heavy, charged silence, the kind that precedes a violent storm. I knew they were panicking, scrambling, trying to decide how to react. I imagined the furious, circular arguments happening within the walls of my mansion. Then, on the fourth day, the storm broke. I had returned home late from the hospital, my body aching with fatigue, my mind numb. The red light on our old answering machine was blinking furiously. There were 7 new messages, all from Christopher. I pressed the play button, and my son's voice, a voice I had once loved more than life itself, filled my quiet kitchen, twisted into a sound I barely recognized. The first message was a torrent of incredulous rage. A lawyer? You sent a lawyer's letter to my house? To your own son? Are you insane? My father is fighting for his life in a hospital, and this is what you do? You attack his family? What is wrong with you? The second message was a performance of wounded victimhood. I can't believe you would do this to us, Mom. We are trying our best. Things are just tough right now. We're under so much pressure. And you just add to it. You're supposed to be our mother. You're supposed to help us, not hurt us. The messages continued in this vein, a desperate, chaotic blend of anger, self-pity, and blame. The final message was the most telling. Ashley is a wreck. She hasn't stopped crying since she opened it. You've terrified her. This is insane, Mom. You need to call me back right now, and you need to call off this attack dog lawyer, or I swear you will regret this for the rest of your life. I listened to all 7 messages, and when the machine fell silent, I felt nothing but a profound, empty calm. Mr. Corrigan had been right. There was no remorse. There was no offer to pay, no hint of accountability. There was only the entitled fury of a spoiled child whose endless supply of candy had just been cut off. I calmly deleted all 7 messages. They were not content with leaving voicemails. The next afternoon, as I was preparing to head back to the hospital, their gleaming, oversized SUV screeched to a halt in front of my small, modest house. They had come to my territory, to the home Michael and I had shared for 30 years, to wage this war in person. I watched from the window as they stormed up the walkway. Ashley was dressed in what looked like an expensive business suit, her face a mask of cold fury. Christopher trailed behind her, his face a pathetic mixture of anger and anxiety. I opened the front door before they had a chance to knock. I stood in the doorway, blocking their entrance. How could you? Ashley began, her voice sharp and accusatory, foregoing any greeting. After we welcomed you into our family, after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? With threats and lawyers? The sheer audacity of her words, after everything we've done for you, was almost breathtaking. I believe you have it backward, Ashley, I said, my voice as cold and steady as a block of ice. This is about a debt, a promise, both of which you and my son have broken for 6 months, while you lived a life of luxury and my husband and I went bankrupt. Don't you dare bring my father into this. Christopher finally found his voice, stepping forward. It's not our fault. He has a weak heart. You can't blame us for that. I can, and I do, I stated, my gaze unwavering. Your choices, your greed, and your utter lack of character put him in that hospital bed. Christopher's face crumpled, and for a moment, he looked like a lost little boy. He tried the old manipulation, the one that had always worked before. Mom, please, he pleaded, his voice softening. Let's not do this. Just give us a little more time. I'll get the money, I swear. Things will turn around. Just call off the lawyer, please, for Dad. I looked at my son, at the man he'd become, and the last vestiges of my maternal pity withered and died. He was still trying to use his dying father as a bargaining chip. No, I said. The word was final, absolute. There is no more time. The demand letter you received is not a suggestion. It is a legal notice. You have 6 days left. You will either pay the full amount you are in arrears or you will vacate my property." Ashley let out a scornful laugh. "Your property? Are you delusional? This is our home. We have rights. We will fight you in court. You will not just throw us out on the street." I looked at her, this cruel, parasitic woman who had poisoned my son's heart. "Then I suggest you find a very good lawyer," I said, my voice a quiet, deadly whisper. "Though I'm not sure how you'll afford one. Now please get off my porch. I have to get back to the hospital to be with my husband." I closed the door on their stunned, sputtering faces, the solid click of the lock, a sound of beautiful finality. I leaned against the door for a moment, my heart pounding, but not from fear. It was the thrill of the fight, the feeling of power reclaimed. They had come here expecting to find the weak, tearful mother they had always known. They had found Arthur Corrigan's client instead. The demand letter had been the first turn of the gear. The eviction notice would be the second. And it would be far, far more painful. The 10 days stipulated in Arthur Corrigan's demand letter passed with the slowness of a ticking time bomb. Each day I expected a call, a text, some sign of capitulation from Christopher and Ashley, but there was nothing. Just a defiant, arrogant silence. They were calling my bluff. They were operating under the delusion that had governed their entire lives, that my maternal love was an infinite resource, a line of credit that could be endlessly abused without ever being called due. They still believed, after everything, that I would break before they would. On the 11th day, I was in Michael's hospital room. He was still in the ICU, but his condition had stabilized. He was conscious now, though weak, and his presence, the simple fact of him being awake and aware, was a balm to my frayed soul. Mr. Corrigan called me, his voice crisp and devoid of surprise. "As expected, they have failed to respond, Mrs. Taylor. Their silence is our green light. The official notice to quit is prepared. The process server will deliver it this afternoon." The serving of that notice marked the end of the family dispute and the beginning of a formal legal action. The process server, a large, impassive man, later told Mr. Corrigan that Ashley had answered the door. She had apparently tried to slam it in his face, but he had been quicker, placing his foot in the jam. He'd stated her name, announced that she had been legally served, and dropped the papers at her feet as she screamed obscenities at him. The state of Virginia was now officially involved. This was no longer a mother's plea, it was a legal command. They had 30 days to vacate the property. The arrival of a legally binding notice, a document that spoke of courts and sheriffs, finally seemed to penetrate their bubble of entitlement. They went into a full-blown panic, and their only weapon was to try and turn my own world against me. They began a vicious, desperate smear campaign. They called every relative we had, every old friend, every senior member of our church. Their story was a masterwork of manipulative fiction. They painted me as a cruel, vindictive crone who had suffered a mental breakdown after Michael's heart attack. They claimed I had fallen under the spell of a predatory lawyer who was isolating me from my family and trying to steal their home. They wept on the phone, professing their deep love for the father they hadn't even bothered to visit in the hospital. Soon, my own phone began to ring. Well-meaning cousins, old church friends, neighbors, all of them, calling to express their deep concern. They urged me to show compassion, to reconcile with my poor, distraught son, to not make a rash decision in a time of grief. Each call was a fresh stab of betrayal. The frustration of having my own character assassinated by the son for whom I had sacrificed everything. The first few times I tried to explain, my voice trembling with rage and hurt, but I quickly learned the futility of it. Following Mr. Corrigan's advice, I adopted a simple, impenetrable mantra. "Thank you for your concern," I would say, my voice a calm, polite wall of ice. "This is a private legal matter being handled by my attorney, and I am not able to discuss the details." The one opinion that truly mattered, however, was still a mystery to me. Michael was growing stronger each day, but I had hesitated to burden him with the details of the escalating war. I was terrified he would think I was being too harsh, that his gentle heart would ache for the son he still loved. Finally, one afternoon, as I was helping him with a small cup of water, he took my hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "Joe," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper, "tell me everything I need to know." And so I told him. I told him about Ashley's texts, about the meeting with Corrigan, the demand letter, the notice to quit, the smear campaign. I laid it all bare, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting for his judgment. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, his eyes closed. A single tear traced a path through the wrinkles at the corner of his eye. Then he opened his eyes and looked at me, and in their depths, I saw not sorrow, but a fierce, burning pride. "Good," he whispered, his grip on my hand tightening. "You did the right thing, Joe. You are fighting for us. You finish it. You finish it for both of us." His validation was like a suit of armor. The doubts, the fears, the whispers of the outside world, they all fell away. We were a team again. We were survivors. The 30 days ticked by. I focused all my energy on Michael. He was moved out of the ICU and into a regular cardiac recovery room. We began the slow, arduous process of physical therapy. Each painful step he took with a walker was a victory, a step away from the darkness his son had plunged him into. Across town, in a mansion paid for by our life's work, Christopher and Ashley continued to live in their fantasy. A neighbor called to tell me they had hosted a small poolside party, their laughter and music drifting over the fence. The sheer, defiant arrogance of it was all the confirmation I needed that I was on the right path. They were making no effort to pack, no plans to leave. They were children, convinced that if they simply closed their eyes and wished hard enough, the monster would go away. On the 30th and final day, I was in Michael's room helping him eat his dinner when my phone rang. It was Arthur Corrigan. "Joanna, it's Arthur," he said. "The 30-day period expires in 1 hour. Have you heard from them?" "Not a word, Arthur," I said, looking at my husband, who gave me a slow, determined nod. "As I expected," Mr. Corrigan said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. "I have the unlawful detainer lawsuit drafted and ready. It will be filed with the courthouse first thing tomorrow morning. The final phase is now beginning. A court date will be set and a judgment will be rendered. Then the sheriff will pay them a visit." I hung up the phone. My son and his wife had ignored the letters. They had ignored the warnings. They were about to learn that you cannot ignore a court order. You cannot ignore a summons. And you most certainly cannot ignore a sheriff's deputy standing on your front porch, eviction notice in hand. The wheels of justice, I discovered, grind slowly, but they grind with an unstoppable, merciless force. As Mr. Corrigan had filed the eviction lawsuit, he had been confident. They have no legal defense, Joanna. Their only strategy is to delay and hope you lose your nerve. My nerve, however, was now forged from pure steel. Christopher and Ashley were served with a court summons. Unsurprisingly, they failed to appear on the appointed date. Their absence was a silent admission of guilt. The judge, presented with the mountain of clear, irrefutable evidence. The deed in my name, the loan in my name, the 6 months of my bank statements showing me paying for their life of luxury, issued a default judgment in my favor. The eviction was no longer a threat, it was a court order. The day the sheriff came to enforce that order was a day I did not witness myself. I was at the rehabilitation center helping Michael learn to walk again, but our old neighbor, a kind woman named Mary, called me that evening and described the scene in a hushed, sorrowful voice. The county sheriff's car, its presence an undeniable symbol of authority, had pulled into the driveway of the grand mansion. The deputy, a large, stoic man, had knocked on the door. When Christopher answered, his face a mask of arrogant disbelief, he was presented with the writ of possession. Mary said she could hear their shouting from across the street, Ashley screaming about her rights, Christopher threatening to sue. The deputy had been unmoved. He had simply informed them that they had 1 hour to gather their personal belongings and vacate the property before he would be forced to remove them physically. The spectacle of their fall from grace was, as Mary described it, both pitiful and shocking. They were forced to scramble, throwing expensive clothes and personal trinkets into trash bags. The neighbors, who had once been so impressed by their lavish parties and luxury cars, now watched from behind their curtains as my son and his wife were escorted off the property they had treated as their kingdom. They were left on the perfectly manicured lawn, surrounded by a pathetic pile of garbage bags, the locks on the mansion being changed behind them. They were no longer the envy of the neighborhood. They were a cautionary tale. The moment Mr. Corrigan called to tell me the property was officially back in my control, I set the final phase of my plan in motion. I had no desire to ever set foot in that house again. It was tainted with the memory of betrayal. I hired a respected estate sale company and gave them one instruction: liquidate everything. The designer furniture, the massive flat-screen televisions, the barely used professional-grade kitchen appliances, the racks of expensive clothes Ashley had left behind, all of it was sold. The proceeds, a small but satisfying sum, were the first infusion of money back into our ravaged savings account. With the house empty, we put it on the market. It sold in less than a month. The day of the closing was the day I finally felt the crushing weight of the $1.2 million loan lift from my soul. The sale of the house was enough to pay off the entire outstanding mortgage to the bank. After Mr. Corrigan's legal fees were paid, there was a modest amount left over. It was a pittance compared to the life savings we had lost on the down payment, but it was something. It was a start. We were not rich. We were not even where we had been a year ago, but we were free. The bleeding had stopped. A year has passed since that day. Michael's recovery has been slow but steady. The heart attack left its mark, a permanent reminder of the price of our son's greed, but he is alive. He is with me. We sold our old house in Virginia, a place now filled with too many ghosts of a dream that had turned into a nightmare. With the money from that sale and the small amount we had recovered, we bought a small, peaceful cottage in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Our life now is quiet, and it is beautiful. We live on Michael's pension and our Social Security. Our days are measured not by financial statements, but by the rising and setting of the sun. I have a large garden, and I spend my mornings with my hands in the earth. Michael has a small workshop where he spends hours building intricate, beautiful birdhouses, his hands, once so skilled with massive ship engines, now finding a new, more gentle purpose. We have new friends. A community of people who know us simply as Joe and Mike, who value our company, not our assets. We never heard from Christopher or Ashley again. After their eviction, They vanished, swallowed up by the world that does not offer a safety net of inherited wealth. Sometimes in the dead of night, I wonder where they are, what has become of them. But the thought is fleeting. They are a closed chapter in a book I no longer read. The dream of grandchildren is gone. I have made my peace with that. I look at my husband, his face more wrinkled now, his hair whiter, but his eyes full of a quiet contentment as he watches the birds flock to the feeder outside our window. And I know the truth. We were so desperate for a legacy, for a continuation of our family, that we nearly sacrificed our own lives for a son who did not value us at all. We lost our savings. We lost our health. We lost a child. But in the end, we saved each other. We sit on our small porch, the mountain air clean and cool, and we are finally, truly at peace. We are together, and that is more than enough.